Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is our Women-Owned Business Certification Process Seminar or webinar for today. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for our first small business seminar of this month of December. I'm Sandra Wilson, president of the Paducah Chamber, and we are so honored to be able to continue to bring programming and services for our small businesses. Sometimes when seeking potentially lucrative government contracts, smaller companies can be at a disadvantage, and especially when compared with their larger competitors. So the Small Business Administration has developed programs and implemented those and a lot of training that will help businesses to become hub zone businesses and women-owned small businesses, to give preference to them when they're competing for federal contracts. So to help provide a level playing field for women business owners, the government limits competition for certain contracts to businesses that participate in this women-owned small business federal contracting program through that certification. And the goal of the federal government is to award at least 5% of all federal contracting dollars to women-owned small businesses each year. The certification process has changed, and so that's why we are offering this webinar today, is to help our women-owned small businesses locally to know more about those changes and to help get recertified with the SBA. Those of you who are doing business in our area already know that there are several companies here that do work with these government contracts, in particular Four Rivers Nuclear Partnership and Swift and Stelly and some of the others at the Department of Energy site. So it really does give you an advantage if you can determine how you can work with them in some of their contracting. So joining us is Carrie Willett, the Senior Procurement Counselor at the Kentucky Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And Carrie joined the KYPTAC, and I'm not sure if that's exactly how you refer it, but that's what I'm going to say, in November of 2017. She is an attorney, licensed in Kentucky, a graduate of the University of Kentucky Law School. She's practiced in state court, representing clients in domestic and civil litigation, but her primary interest has been in public procurement. She also spent several years practicing law with the Air Force. She has a bachelor's degree in English, a master's degree in education, and then, as I mentioned, is an attorney. WPSD, Local 6 is live streaming this call. I believe it's on their Facebook page. We are recording it here at the Chamber, and we will be posting it on our website following this call and referring to it in the future as we have those small businesses that want to learn more about the certification process. I understand today may be Carrie's birthday. So we're we'll celebrate with you and apologize also at the same time for taking some of your birthday time away. But we're happy to have you with us, Carrie. We have lost your video right now, so I don't know if you've turned it on, but we turned it off, but we will need you to turn your video back on.
Okay, I was trying to turn my camera off. Do you have my screen still?
We do have your slides up.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Sorry, I'm having troubles today.
And you should be able to control your slides yourself.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, we're looking forward to hearing from you, Carrie.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, I apologize that I'm sitting here drinking coffee out of a wine glass because I was sharing my coffee with my daughter, and then she decided she didn't want it. So this is not wine yet. So, you know, I'll switch back and forth. Thank you for the introduction. I usually keep my video off just because, you know, it distracts me, but I'm going to keep it on if that's what you guys want me to do. And as you said, today we're just talking about the women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged. Had to think of what the D was, Women-Owned Small Business Program through the SBA. So to just kind of start, I'm not going to read all these to you, the definitions, but we in the government contracting world certainly use a lot of acronyms. So this is kind of a reference as I go through. There are some things that, you know, you can refer back to this here. And also after this presentation, you can, if you want to look at the, figure out what particular acronyms mean. The important ones here, I do want to point out our PTAC, Procurement and Technical Assistance Center, and that is how we say our agency name. And SBDC, a lot of you may have worked with your Small Business Development Center. as well. These are absolutely no cost free resources. We don't limit ourselves to small businesses to help you with different aspects of your business. The SBDC will kind of do the beginning part. They will help you with the business formation, things like that. But then we help strictly with government contracting. So again, we're talking today about the Woman-Owned Small Business Program. We're going to talk about why you should get certified, whether you're eligible, and what your options are to get certified. The reason that we're presenting this now is because this program just went through major changes. The SBA felt that there was some fraud going on with their previous system, which allowed people to self-certify. So they changed the requirements. October 15th, they went live. So it's brand new to everyone. So why should you get certified? Again, I'm going to jump right to the bottom here. This is for government contracts, and it doesn't apply in strictly the commercial world. So if you're dealing with a commercial entity that's not a government entity, this probably won't help you. There are some large businesses that do value several that do value diverse suppliers, and so they will, they might look at it under their own rules, but the SBA's certification is only designed to help with the public marketplace, with the government marketplace. Every single federal agency has to award some of their contracts to diverse suppliers, and that includes women, that includes historically economically disadvantaged groups. It includes people in HubZone, and I'm glad you mentioned Swift and Saley because they are a client of mine, and I remember working on their HubZone application, and I love it when I see their contracts come through that they're winning. So that's great. And then in addition to that, there's another program called the 8A, which we're not really going to discuss today, but we can, if that's something that you're interested in, certainly my office can help you with that. And veteran-owned small businesses. So the program started in 2000. The goal for the women-owned businesses is 5%. Now, it doesn't apply to every NAICS code, but it certainly applies to a lot. It has gone from 4 NAICS codes to over 400. And a NAICS code is what you're selling. It's a 6-digit code that tells the contracting officer what product or service you have to offer to the government. And another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that in addition to the federal government having these requirements, when a contract is competed full and open, in other words, when it's not restricted to a certain group, the prime contractors on that contract will typically also have diverse spending goals. So Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop, Humana, they will also have to award a certain percent, 5% usually, but they can actually up it internally of their contract dollars to women-owned businesses. Now, I do want to point out that state and local governments, they often have goals too. Some of them are really aggressive goals, like the city of Lexington has a 10% goal for one of their minority spend programs, which is quite a lot. And so sometimes those will accept the woman-owned certification from the SBA. Sometimes it's a separate process. We're not going to talk about those in detail today out of time, but that is something that we can help with. The state of Kentucky does have a separate process for what's called an MWBE, Minority and Women Business Enterprise in Kentucky. So as I said, the goal is 5%, but that's a lot of money when you're talking government contracts. You can read this, but I won't read everything to you, but you can see that 21.4 billion is what was awarded to women-owned small businesses and ED-WOSBs. Of that, 18.8 was awarded through competitions that were restricted to only women-owned small businesses. And what that means is that the government decided that they would get enough competition that they could set they would get three, they could expect reasonably to get 3 offers, and therefore they could set it aside for only women-owned businesses to compete. So, you know, you see that 18.8 versus a 21.4. Some of those just happen to be women-owned businesses. Either they competed under full and open competition, or they had other certifications, but that's the discrepancy there. The government did not hit its goal of 5% in this year, 2017, which was the most recent year that this analysis was done. So again, I know that some of you are very familiar with the program, but some of you are probably wondering, why do I care? The benefits of getting certified, again, we're talking at the federal level. There are certain group of contracts that are only competable. You can only compete if you are a woman-owned or economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. So that's huge. I mean, you're going from a universe of thousands and thousands of companies to, well, a smaller universe across the country of still thousands and thousands of companies sometimes, but a much smaller group. So that's something that's, you know, obviously you're a bigger fish, you're a relatively bigger fish in a smaller pool at that point. So that's, you know, that's why you should care, because those contracts, they add up. Again, $21.4 billion is less than 5% of the government federal spend dollars. Also, in very limited circumstances, a contracting officer can award a sole source contract. That's where they say, okay, Betty's Tire and Pie Shop, we're going to award this directly to you. Now, this is much more tricky, as you can imagine, because the integrity of our procurement system is based on everybody being able to compete so that the government can get a fair price. But nonetheless, this does happen. The ceiling, the limit of sole source contracts that can be awarded under the women-owned program is $6.5 million for manufacturing and $4 million for all others, which is small under the federal acquisition regulation. But again, their definition of small and most of our definitions of small are not quite the same. So how can you be eligible to get women-owned certification? Again, your business must be small. And again, when we say small, we typically mean it's determined by either your revenue or the number of employees you have. We typically mean in the millions of revenue, like 20 million, 15 million. There's some that are, I believe there's some that are under 10 million revenue per year, but mostly you're looking at higher thresholds there. So again, it's small for the purposes of the SBA, but for the purposes of your business, you're doing great. And then for the ones that are determined by the number of employees, usually it's 500. So again, that's a lot of employees for a small business by my definition. But that's how the determination of whether you're small is made. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, it does include all of the SBA's certifications do include affiliated businesses. So if if Boeing spins off a piece of their business and says, okay, we want to be able to compete as a small woman-owned business, so we're going to give you 0.5% of our assets, you can't do that, because that would go back, they would be tied in with the assets. That's something that the word affiliated is something that you'll see over and over in the SBA's programs. That is something that's kind of a tricky determination, but it's something that we can kind of provide guidance on and point you the right way if you have any questions about that. And the NAICS code determination is determined by your primary industry. So, that's obviously where does the majority of your revenue come from. So that's the NAICS code that you have to be certified as small under. And then the other requirements are that it must be 51%, not 50, unconditionally owned and controlled by one or more eligible women. Now, for the purposes of just kind of talking, I will typically say the owner, but it can definitely be 2 female owners. One has 26, one has 25, one has 1 has 50. It can be, you know, it can be multiple female owners, but it does have to meet that 51% threshold. And unfortunately, I have had a client ask me about this. You have to be U.S. citizen in order to get this certification. So that's something that that you'll have to upload proof of too, but it's not a high bar to meet. So this is where the slides start getting really detailed. So what does unconditional and direct ownership mean? Direct means that you can't have a holding company that owns your property. You have to own your that owns your business. You have to own your business outright. And unconditional, it can't be something where someone can, you know, hostile takeover, where someone can wrest control from you, or where you can lose control. So if you're giving stock options to your employees and a person, you know, accumulates enough that they overtake that 51%, that's going to be a problem. And what is unconditional and direct control? You must also control, the woman must also control the long-term decision-making. So you can't be subject to overrule by the board of directors if you have one. You must also control the day-to-day management. And that means you hold the highest position in the company. You manage the business on a full-time basis. So that means that you can't have outside employment that prevents you from devoting a sufficient time to the business. Now, a lot of our clients do have, you know, their business is their side business. So this is something that, you know, definitely people, you need to read very carefully, because full-time employment doesn't necessarily mean 40 hours a week, but it does mean that you have to be able to devote sufficient time to your business. For instance, under the HubZone certification, full-time means 40 hours a month. But again, we can help you kind of navigate through all of that. And now sometimes you'll have a woman-owned plumbing company or electrical company, and these are fields that tend to be male dominated. So sometimes your licenses will all be held by chance by men. So, and that's fine, but the woman has to exercise control and has to be in charge of the company. So when we talk about economically disadvantaged, I want to say kind of 2 things about this one off the top. One is, it's not what you think it is. I mean, the definition of economically disadvantaged, just like the definition of small, is quite different from my definition of economically disadvantaged. And in addition to that, it's quite a bit more invasive. That's how I've heard people describe it, and that's how I've kind of described it before. You have to submit a lot more documentation and answer more questions. And remember, the goal of this is so that you can compete for contracts that are set aside under these programs. And my personal experience is that the cost benefit analysis of the economically disadvantaged program, unless you have another program already, like 8A, where you're kind of de facto, you can see at the bottom there, your economic disadvantage is already proven. It is quite a bit more work, and it is quite a bit more documentation. And if you're married, then your spouse's assets might count as well. But we're going to go over a little bit about how they calculate that income and net worth. So your income is your average, your AGI over the past 3 years must be under $350,000 per year. Now this can exclude some partnership and LLC and S Corp. I forgot my commas there. Income where you can provide documentation that you reinvested the funds in the business, which includes paying taxes for the business. And income includes all your sources of compensation, not just your W-2 type compensation. So if you're getting stock in lieu of cash, that's something that does count. Now, if you happen to win the lottery and you say, well, my 2019 income was significantly higher because I got an inheritance, I won the lottery. congratulations, but that you can explain that away, and you can get that won't necessarily count against you. So again, the net worth calculation, just like the income, is not just your net worth. There's a lot of carve outs. Your net worth excludes whatever equity you have in your personal residence, whatever equity you have in the business that you're applying for the certification for. And then, as you can see, the income that's reinvested in the business. And this is a big one. It includes your retirement, or it excludes your retirement accounts. So, now that net worth calculation of let's see, of 3.5 million is a much, it's a much smaller threshold. Now your unadjusted net worth cannot exceed $6 million at all. So that means that if you have all these exemptions that add up to more than $2.5 million, then you're going to be kicked out of the eligibility for economically disadvantaged women-owned. Now, as I said, in some cases, you have to submit the financial information for your spouse. In most cases, actually, unless you're legally separated or divorced. And your spouse's finances are considered where your spouse has invested, backed a loan, all these things has had involvement with financing your business. Now, there is another thing, I mentioned earlier, like if I'm Boeing and I want to spin off a part of my company to make a smaller company and allow me to have best of both worlds and be able to compete for those for those set asides. If your spouse owns a large company like that in the same line of work, that's also going to be looked askance at. So, how to get certified? Now, as I said, this is what has just changed drastically in the last 2 months. Again, I'm going to skip to the bottom. Apparently, I like to do that. The SBA made some big changes because I'm sure that you have heard of women-owned small business fraud or veteran-owned small business fraud. Sometimes people call it rent-a-vet, where someone will go and find a person who is eligible for one or more certifications, and they install that person as just a figurehead in order to compete for these contracts. That is fraud. It's a federal crime. Every time you submit a bid for a contract or apply for certification through the SBA, you are making an official statement to the government. And of course, the false official statement, there's the False Claims Act, and there's a number of other pieces of legislation that make that a big deal. But in any case, it was a very easy self-certification, loose. You go on their website, you answer some questions, and if you remember, you can upload some documents so they're there in the database for the SBA to look at. No one else, they weren't publicly accessible, and they're still not. But in order to cut down on some of that fraud, up to 40% of those women-owned small business contracts were not being awarded to companies that were actually eligible. The SBA they locked it down. They made it like the hub zone certification, which means that somebody has to put their eyes on it within the SBA. So the only other option is that you can do what's called third-party certification. I'll talk more about that in a minute, and I'll give you kind of my opinion on whether to do that. It is a fee-for-service type situation. So when I say self-certification, I mean direct certification. I mean certification through the SBA website that you, the company owner, do yourself. And as you can see, this is the process. You submit answers to questions, you upload some documentation, which we're going to go through to the SBA's website. It's actually pretty streamlined in terms of government websites, so that's good. I've done several of these with clients, and We've all gotten through them just fine. So, but the problem is, since they just put this into place, literally every small business that was self-certified that didn't have that third-party certification either has to get third-party certified or the SBA has to certify them now. So huge backlog, as you can imagine. I will say, but you know, everyone is in the same boat. I will say that I have had I've probably done about 10 of these, and I have had at least one client who got hers like 2 weeks later. She was approved. So you know, we can't really speak to how long the wait is going to be, just because it's all so new, and because of course right now the SBA has a lot of programs going on and a lot of things that are taking up more of their time than they probably planned for. So as I said, third-party certification is an option. And this, it just, you pay an entity, and they will submit your application for you. And I won't belabor this too much, but all of them, you know, the minute you can see there, you can see the costs of the different agents or the different entities. Now the El Paso Hispanic Chamber, there's almost no information available about them. But just for perspective, you know, I have people ask me often, and when you register your business in SAM, which we'll talk about in a minute, you will get solicited from private entities that do what I do, but they charge a fee for it. For some people, that's great. That's you know, they've got more money than time. For most of our small business owners, though, resources are, you know, are very precious, and so, you know, it's not a high bar to do the application by yourself. So overwhelmingly, our clients decide that they just want to submit the application by themselves. And again, you know, the perspective, we've got 3,000 businesses that get third-party certified a year out of, you know, at least 100,000. So with the direct or self-certification, this is the process. You go through the SBA's website, beta.certify.sba.gov. And in order to do that, you have to do several things. One, you have to get a login.gov account, which is your basic email that you use to log across government systems. They're actually making it a lot more streamlined than it ever has been in the past. So you use your login.gov for your SAM registration, for to check beta.sam.gov, which is where you can find contract opportunities. You use it for USA Jobs now. It's going across, you know, across the entire government. You get a DUNS number. Now, DUNS number is from Dun & Bradstreet, and it's actually, that's something that you have to do before you can start the SAM process. It's free to get that if you go to that website, and that's something that we can help with if you need help on that as well. And you do SAM registration, and I'll be honest with you, SAM registration is much more painful, in my opinion, than the woman-owned small business certification. The woman-owned small business is pretty straightforward. The questions are plain language questions. It's not written like legislation. It's not written in that way that is convoluted, and you'll have to, you know, look up statutes and sections of the FAR, because the SAM certification requires you to certify all of these, you know, that you're abiding by all of these regulations that are in the federal acquisition regulation. Again, we happily walk clients through that process as well. This doesn't mean anything to you now, but if you can remember, it's very important that you enter your addresses the same on Dun & Bradstreet and in SAM, because if you don't, you'll get stuck in this endless loop of address mismatch, and that's no fun. It is something that, you know, that you can get out of, but it certainly adds a lot to the process. And then you'll develop something called an MPIN. I think it's a 9-digit personal identification number, mix of numbers and letters that you use as your way of signing things in SAM. And a lot of people don't hold on to that, or don't they'll need it outside of SAM, but you absolutely will. You will need it for the women-owned small business certification, because you have to sign that as well. And then you go to this beta.certify.sba website, and you do what's called Claim Your Business. You fill out the sections of the application, you upload the documents as you go, and then the SBA gets back to you. So we'll go through a little bit more of that in a minute, but I do want to say that with the resources you're getting today, I have sent a blank, just basically a list of all the questions on the application, so you can see before you get into the website what you're doing and what you can expect. And these are the things that you need to have if you come to us for help, or if you if you just do it on your own. You have to have these things ready when you sit down at your computer, and they have to be saved as electronic files. So DUNS number, TIN, MPIN, proof of citizenship, as I said, just for the female owners, no need to upload for minor owners. And that would be state issued birth certificate, unexpired US passport, or naturalization papers. And you have to have a resume. This is one that catches a lot of people, because I'm running a business. I'm not applying for a job. Why do I need a resume? You have to prove that you are qualified to own and control the business. So it doesn't have to be something, you don't have to come up with bullets about what you're doing, but you have to have some kind of narrative there that tells why you are qualified to supervise people, and of course to work in a certain industry. So this is the second list. These are the things that you need to have for your business before you apply. Now, one of the other resources you'll be getting is called a quick start guide. I don't typically refer people to the government's websites for help. Well, that's not fair, but sometimes I don't, because sometimes they're not that helpful. But the SBA has done a tremendous job of getting out information on this process, the new process, the changes, checklists, things like that. So it's worth your time to go and to poke around. As I said, you'll be getting what's called a quick start guide for the SBA for this certification with your materials today. And that's a 6-pager, I think, and it goes through, why you need these documents and what they are. Joint venture agreements, if it doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply to you, right? Corporations, you can see there what they need to include. LLCs, I do want to point out that a lot of my very small LLCs, 1 owner, 2 owner, family-owned businesses don't have an operating agreement, and that's not something that the Secretary of State requires. So they just haven't developed one, but that is something that's required for this process. If you don't have one, Legal Shield, go through one of these prepaid legal services, things like that. Contact your attorney. There are templates online, and there are some quite good ones. So there's ways to get that, but it is something you have to take care of, because that's where it says what your ownership percentage is. And then, of course, your articles of organization and any amendments to those. And then your partnership and sole proprietor requirements as well. So I just wanted to kind of give you a feel for the website. This is the login screen. It's, as you can see, it's pretty intuitive. I mean, obviously the questions get a little more challenging as you go along, but in the previous iteration of this, with the self-certification where you had to fill out the questionnaire, the questions were written in such an awful way. They were, do you not have, they were double negatives, and it was very confusing. I mean, even for people that are trained in the law, it was really confusing. So these questions are a lot more straightforward and a lot easier to answer. And again, the SBA has a very extensive library of resources for you that you can look at if you have questions. And then you claim your business. Again, I couldn't do this because I don't have a business, but you enter your DUNS number, you enter this information, and then your business pops up. See, there's where you need that. Now, I just want to say, and I know that I'm almost out of time, about certifications. Certifications are great, but my boss calls them licenses to fish. You have to be able to fish. That's much more important. A lot of people get very, very hung up on certification, especially new businesses. They get very excited, very hung up, and there's a lot of misinformation. The government has to buy from me if I have this. Well, they have to buy from a woman-owned small business, certainly, but they can buy from whichever one they want. And obviously they're going to go with the one that is qualified to perform. You can change ownership to get to qualify for woman-owned small business, but we have people that say, well, can I be 50% veteran owned and 50% woman owned? You can be any kind of owner, you can have any ownership you want, but you can't have certifications based on that. It has to be that 51% threshold. Now, prime contractors might care. I mean, there's other, one of the other myths is that if I'm a Native American woman veteran who lives in a HUD zone, I can get contracts all day. Prime contractors will stack multiple ones sometimes, but the federal government, they can't. A set aside is a set aside. And it can only be set aside for one category. So, that can help you compete for a larger number of things, but it's not going to get you double credit or anything like that. And again, I just tell people, if you don't qualify for a certification, there's still plenty of contracts out there that you can bid on. And as I said before, I don't want to discourage anyone from pursuing it, but the economically disadvantaged women-owned small business process is quite lengthy. So again, just what my office does, we help with everything related to government contracting, from getting that DUNS number to getting contracts, finding contracts, and to performing contracts. We aren't the SBA, so we can't, if you got a technical issue, even though technical is in our name, we aren't IT, so we can't, we sometimes have to refer you to help desks. We try really hard not to do that though. Our website is there, as you can see. And then I also put the SBA, the Certify website. One thing about my office, if you want to become a client, we'd love to have you. You can go ahead and you do have to apply to be a client with us. So you can find out information on that on our website. And we do a lot of webinars ourselves too. We do one every week. And you can also run through the link to see if you're eligible before you start. So this is as I said, this is the first page of the quick start guide. It will be something that you get though when you get the materials. And there's my contact information.
Carrie, thank you so much for this information today. We have not really gotten any specific questions. We have had some comments about small businesses and why you have these kind of set aside programs. So I think you covered quite a bit about that today, but is there anything else that you would like to approach on that, to mention why these are important?
Yeah, so as I said, that this particular one didn't start until 2000, which was kind of surprising to me, actually. The government just like, with competing for federal jobs, the government wants to give everybody a fair shot. And the government recognized that in certain NAICS codes, women-owned businesses were not getting any contract, and they were not able to succeed in that federal government place. So they developed this program to allow it's a very small percentage. Obviously, it still adds up of those contracts to be set aside, just so that those business owners could compete in order to level the playing field.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I'll just say to the people that are on the call, we're going to send a follow-up email to the ones that had registered and were on the call with your slides, and then some of the information that you referred to on the call about that form and some other information that would help them to work through this process. So we'll send all of that out today, and that will have your contact information as well. The Paducah Chamber focuses a lot on small businesses, and we have a small business committee. So I know that there are several people on this call today that may be interested in learning more about the small business committee. So we want just send us an email to that. You can always reach us at info@paducahchamber.org. That's the easiest way to remember. My email is swilson@paducahchamber.org as well. And then we would like to perhaps have a follow-up call with this group that's been on the call today, maybe in mid-January or toward the end of the month, to just see how that they're going and what the process is. And then we might bring some of those DOE contractors on that call with us so that they could talk specifically about the things that they have. I do have, let's see, someone is asking about how many women-owned small businesses do we have in this area? I don't. Do you have that information?
Well, I was starting to type out, that's, that it's hard to say that just because how many women-owned small businesses with the certification that are interested in government contracting specifically. I can tell you my office, we cover the whole state of Kentucky, and we have about 1,600 clients. Now, though, not all of them are women-owned, obviously, not all are, some are veteran-owned, some are large. So, it's not a small number, but certainly, as I said, it's a much smaller pool when you start adding in women-owned, women that's certified as women-owned, interested in government contracting, able to compete, able to perform. So it is definitely worth getting that certification. It's worth the effort. And I see this, and I see another question: are there any preferences for minority women? And there is what's called the 8A program. Didn't talk too much about that, and it's kind of a process, so I don't want to get too much into it, but that is for minority groups, like I said, historically economically disadvantaged groups. That is a specific program that allows the government to sole source more contracts in addition to competing things for just HubZone. Now, the state of Kentucky has the MWBE, and that is minority and or women owned. So minority owned or women owned, state of Kentucky is the same preference.
Okay, great. Anything else you can think of?
I don't think so. I can't believe I got through it all.
Is there a certain time frame we're working on of when that they have to do this recertification by any certain date?
Yeah, that's a good question. And right now, that's one thing I wanted to address, but there's no information about it yet. Because you will have to recertify, just like with HubZone. You have to recertify every, I think it's 3 years for HubZone. And you have to meet certain qualifications, but they haven't said yet how often the women-owned self-certification process how often they will have to recertify. And there's certainly, it's a rolling deadline in terms of getting the certification so that you're eligible to compete. It just depends. You have to have it essentially before you can be awarded a contract under women-owned preference.
Okay, great. Well, happy birthday again. And thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And to all of the people that are on the call with us, please keep us, let us know if how you're doing with this. We'll send you all this information, and then we'll do some follow-up calls and kind of make this into our own little small business committee about this type of certification, and as we move forward into 2021. So thank you, Carrie. Happy holidays, and happy holidays to everyone that's joined us today. We appreciate everyone's time. So have a safe and great day. Thank you very much.